while we try to solve this, I know we have seen very many intersections between the works, and I'm constantly thinking about how all these collaborations and the challenges that they bring into an institutional level throws us back to one of the questions, I think that was Clemence who posed in the very beginning, which is how can we change our own practices through these collaborations? How can we practice museology in a different way? So if we have a mic to use, I would like to start by posing you this question from an individual level. How do you change? How can you see your own practices as curators or your research as academics being transformed by these contacts or by these collaborations with external communities from the museum, marginalized communities, either indigenous groups or other marginalized groups that have been challenging how we operate in museums lately? Who would like to start?
Does that work? Yeah. So for me, for my research, I work principally on the work of George Nuku, but also another artist, Brooke Andrew, and I think who's of Aboriginal descent in Australia. And what's quite striking, I guess, is that they have both very different relationships with institutions, especially in Europe. And so they have very different lived experiences with these institutions as well. Well, George kind of arrives and basically takes over the institution where everybody is kind of requested to help and work on the project. And so it becomes very collaborative, and it's almost like he becomes, the boss. And I think he likes to think of himself as this. While Brooke Andrew has at several occasions written and testified about how there has been hurdles with institutions, especially in Europe, where he had works that were planned and approved and where kind of last minute changes were made, and that institution don't necessarily kind of realize of how impactful that is, especially when there was work that was done primarily with communities, and how there were kind of processes of also agreeing for what he was going to show and what the kind of discourse was going to be. So I think they're on kind of just the one way, and especially for George, because he lives in Europe, it's also, I guess, he feels more like his space, and so that definitely, like, the museum experience can be quite traumatic and very different, I think, depending on where you live and with which institutions you work with.
So to rephrase your question, so how does the relationship and the collaboration change with museum? So to me, the easy answer will be it changed the perspective on time and investments for those artists. So it will be the easy answers. But to me, it's really the human relationships that change in the way we communicate with each other. So Caroline Monet rely on the collaboration with the curator to interpret the artwork. And then Caroline Monet also, she makes herself available, and you were showing lots of activities made with the public. So also she makes herself available to meet the public and the audience, to create the space of communications and dialogue. And so, because as an Indigenous artist, she really struggles to have access also to certain resources and support. So she seeks supports from curators such as Peter Rake, which I was quoting, and many other curators that could welcome her in their institutions. Voilà, to make it short.
I'm sorry, can you repeat the question?
In what way? In what way do you see your own practicing changed by collaborating with external partnerships, or either as a curator or a researcher?
So, like I mentioned, right now, currently, there's a couple of a kind of strong division between archaeologists and museologists, and maybe they don't even realize that. but I am working with both of them, and I see that, and there's a lot of ego in the middle going on. So I think the first step will be to kind of drop that ego and understand that we are both in the same, we're in the same parallel issue,
Level.
same level. Yeah, thank you. So we're kind of the same level of how we need to tackle what's going on the island, and ask if they ever get to see that we are in the same level. Well, that's I think how things could change. But right now I'm just in the middle trying to see how I can unite them, if that makes sense.
Yes.
I think the collaboration has made me a much better collections-based researcher. I think it is challenging because it extends beyond my formal training. And so my formal training was very much in archaeology and anthropology and being attentive to objects and the relationships between me and the objects. And I think this collaboration sort of forces a centering of human relationships. And it's made me question sort of how I define art. It's made me think about not just sort of what I observe in collections, but also think about what never makes it into museum collections that I study and why that is. But it also, I mean, we butt heads at times, which I think is really important. We have really sharp divisions and understandings of legibility. A lot of Pablo Delano's art, and I imagine for a lot of the art that was discussed today, is based on, insider knowledge and local references. And so there is very much of an artistic attention to wanting to keep things ambiguous and feeling like every visitor shouldn't necessarily have the same experience of the practice. But for myself, as not just an anthropologist, but also a professor and thinking about teaching, you want to have pedagogy be accessible. So that's definitely a constant challenge.
And what you said about ego, so it keeps repeating to have humility when working with indigenous people. And so in doing that research, I saw how much human skills and emotional skills were important, in particular when you tackle human remains, such a sensitive topic. So humility is key.
Yeah, you're going with that. Thank you for bringing that up, actually, because since the whole topic of ego, it's just not in terms of museums and archaeologists, it also goes on to the people that are practitioners of Taino culture. They want to preserve it so bad that they don't want, some of them, not all, some of them don't want to even include outsiders, not even other Puerto Ricans, which is, for me, it's kind of weird. We should all work together to preserve something that to other people is lost, which no, it's just like collective memory, which is a topic that's been going on today, which I love it. But yeah, it goes back to the whole ego and things, and it's just kind of weird to see how it's all divided when, again, we're on the same level and we should just work collaborative. Yeah.
Yeah, I definitely have more questions, but I would like to hear from the audience. Yes, please. We have one right here. Let's see. Can you try? I mean, this is not such a big room. Maybe if you try to speak up.
Speak up, it's fine. Just for the online.
That's correct. Yes.
All right. Yes. Hi. So my question is both for Clémence and Clémentine. So you're both working with indigenous communities coming from a colonizing culture, from a colonizing empire. And so, Clémence, you talked a bit about your process, right, of how to try and really listen and work with these communities. But I want to ask the both of you, what has been the most challenging part of working with an indigenous community as non-indigenous researchers? And yeah, what are some maybe insights you gained, some self-reflection you've done that has improved your approach?
Thanks, Leilani, for the question. So I should say that I've only worked in person with George and not with Brooke. So there is a different approach in this way. I just try to listen, I think, is the biggest thing, and not kind of bring my own ideas and preconceptions or anything. I know that I spent 10 days in Vienna for this exhibition, and it's it was about being available for George, because we have kind of a personal relationship, but also for the museum team. And sometimes it's also navigating that kind of relationship with the institution and the artist. So I think a lot of it on my part is to listen, make myself available, and just go with what the person wants, rather than try to kind of try to have my own imprint on what they do, because this is not the point at all, at least not in my work.
So your question implies that there is a challenge, and sometimes we hear that, oh, it's difficult to work with communities or indigenous people. But to me, it wasn't a negative challenge. And actually, Caroline Monet is a super busy artist, so she made myself a gift to be available for me and the research I was doing about her. So as a way to thank her, I made a gift, and I want to stay close of her because she made herself available for me more than I made myself available for her, because she's the one busy.
Thank you all so much for your presentations. I was thinking, following up on your answer just now, but I was also thinking about the discussion we had yesterday about, this sort of difference between the temporary and permanent displays, and the difficulty of institutional change, or the slowness of it, the limits of that. And now you just mentioned, how curators are also negotiate between museums and artists. So I just wondered if there's more to say about that.
So the nature of Caroline Monet's work for Transatlantic and Proximal, even though it's a big sculpture and it looks permanent, the nature of the work, because it's indigenous, it's impermanent and immaterial. So it will constantly evolve from the collection. And I love that challenge. And it's a challenge for the National Gallery of Canada that wants to showcase the work in a gallery. So I will looking for that.
So, sort of on a similar note, Paulo Delano's work with the Museum of the Old Colony is a site-specific installation, and so it's been in a variety of contexts. I think to see it on the positive side of it is that the exhibition sort of grows and changes to fit different locations, and think about things like, concepts like solidarity and how the Puerto Rican experience has parallels with other life experiences. Mm-hmm. I think the challenges are sort of thinking maybe more large scale about how such art practice might influence like long-term institutional change. And that's a difficult question. I know for Delano specifically, he already sort of envisions that the work as a whole will ultimately be deposited at the Museum of Puerto Rican Contemporary Art. And has a commitment from them that it will sort of consistently sort of be on display there. So, and that is something, even in studying my own work, the sort of comparative work on Puerto Rican collections, North American institutions, that I actually found, people often found it surprising that there were enough collections to even observe. Like one of the first things I would always get when I was presenting my dissertation research was, shouldn't you expand your research to other islands? Because surely there can't be enough from Puerto Rico stateside. But I think a large part of that is this sort of vision of Puerto Rico as a sort of immaterial landscape, often because it's not on exhibition. But so much of it exists in these storehouses, which are not seen by the public.
Yeah, I was also really struck yesterday with this discussion around the temporary and the permanent, and something that I'm looking at and that you also touched upon is about this redisplay of temporary artwork. And so I think there is some form of permanence in this constant redisplay that, if people get to kind of see them several times, you get to be more acquainted with the work and you get to revisit it. So it's always interesting how artists kind of reframe their work to fit in every exhibition space. But it is, I think there is something in this kind of, you know, a work doesn't stop as it's shown once and then it's over. I know that I've had this discussion with George when he first did these kind of lithographs with the motif. I was like, but why did you all of a sudden kind of do this? You had never done this before. You were doing kind of plastic work. And he was like, no, I'm not, you know, first time, if I have an idea, I don't think that, oh, I've done it, so I'm going to then discard it. This idea needs to kind of carry on living. But he had done work with lithograph many, many years ago. And just didn't kind of get the chance to revisit it. And so when he had then the special collection built with a collection in France and with the curator, then he kind of just took this, and now he's traveling around Europe with institutions showing these archival images through his kind of traveling museum through France, through Vienna, and now he's back in France, then he's back in Dresden. And so there is also this kind of I believe, transmission of the work, even if you cannot go and revisit indefinitely the work in the first place you've seen it, there is maybe a possibility for you to see it elsewhere and then gain something else from it. So yeah, I think there are interesting discussions going on around this.
I think right now this is kind of interesting because they're more into like temporary and now like full on like permanent. At least for the human remains, they're on permanent because there is no place else to put them. So that's also like an issue going on in Puerto Rico, because it was kind of shocking to me when I went to one of the interviewees' office and I saw like archaeological objects in their like table where they drink coffee, you know. It's like, okay, it's there. Why is that there? And like, yeah, there's nowhere else to put it. And the museums actually put them on display because it's better to have them out there, which is even more controlled in terms of climate and everything, and have it in the back. And also the whole idea, at least two of them mainly, they were like, we still want people to remember about this. We need them to talk about this because this is something that has been lost in the words, you know, the whole Taino culture, and we need people to keep remembering, which kind of goes back with a collective memory on another presentation, you know. So it's kind of also a way of them trying to regain that memory. And it was also interesting to see that some of them, actually one of the administrator was like, well, it all depends on the guest intentions. So you can either have people saying, no, don't display them, and other people, I love to see this. So yeah, that's kind of interesting.
Okay, thank you all for being so precise in your responses and so honest. Unfortunately, we're going to have to stop for the lunch break, but I would like to finish by reminding you that all the works are published in the materials for discussion, so there is a lot of inspiration there as well. And I would like to thank our presenters for the very insightful work, and everyone for being with us until now, and Carrie Sutton, who has given us support during this session, very vital support for the sessions. Thank you.